The turnitin.com instructions you picked up, it shouldn't really be anything brand new to you. If you used it last year, it's the same setup as before. If you don't remember your username and password, that's not a problem. You can just set up a new one. It doesn't have to necessarily be like your student ID. You're not going to use that until next week when you submit your final copy for the Grapes of Wrath essays. But I want to get it out to you in advance so that you can try to log in. You do need the class code and the password. Figured all your passwords are basically NHSD, so why change this one? But if it's a different account than what you used last year, that's not a problem. It doesn't all have to be student Gmails and things like that. If you remember your account that you forgot your password, there is the forget your password little link, and you can hit that, and I think you just go through some kind of authorization to unlock it again. Don't wait until next Friday when your essays are going to be due to submit, or to try to set up your login. Trying to take care of it this week, so if you're running into any issues, we don't have a problem. If Jack goes, hey, I tried to submit my essay, but I couldn't because it wouldn't let me get into turnitin.com, and we're doing this at the end of next week, it's far too late. So part of the responsibility will be for you to make sure you take care of all that stuff, in advance. So I would try it at some point this weekend, maybe sometime this week or over the weekend, and if Monday, Tuesday next week we're having problems, we can try to figure it out as best we can. Tomorrow I'm not going to be here. I'm going to be down in Pitt for a meeting. So before I forget, your Bedford Reader, you need to bring your Bedford Reader to class tomorrow. In your Bedford Reader, there's an article entitled "Shooting an Elephant" by George Orwell. Some of you might have read Animal Farm in ninth grade. Based on your looks, most of you probably didn't. Some of you are going to read George Orwell later this year with 1984. British writer, pretty well known, mostly novels, but also does some short essay pieces. This is an essay narrative of when Orwell is a police officer for Great Britain in Burma over by India with imperialism taking place. So he's a police officer, elephants on the loose, he has to shoot an elephant. Hence the title, Shooting an Elephant. Tomorrow when you come in, there are going to be multiple choice questions and little baby scantrons. Everyone loves little baby scantrons. If you've been playing with your Richmond, you've seen them before. They're very cute. People adore them. It puts everyone in a happy mood before answering multiple choice questions. So we're all for it. It's 15 questions, so it's not lengthy. Theoretically, you don't have to have the whole entire article read in order to answer the question. But if you're going to answer, bless you, 15 questions in a class period, it would help to have the article read ahead of time. So, that would be my suggestion to you. I'm leaving notes for the sub, who I don't know who it is, doesn't matter, that you can work together in groups. So you can be in groups of up to 3 if you want. The questions themselves you're going to keep, and you're just going to turn them scantron by periods and. Okay. That's it for tomorrow. And then Friday is when you'll have your rough draft for Grapes of Wrath. Prompt 2, same setup as we did last Friday. Peer edit sheet will be out, and I'll come around and check things on it and put it in the credit. On Friday, the plan would also be that I'll pass back your TWAs from yesterday. TWAs are the in-class essays, timed writing assessment. They're fun. I love them. So do you. Really, you will. I promise. It'll happen. So you'll get those things back on Friday. We're not going to talk about them on Friday because we just won't have time with you doing your peer edits. We're going to talk about them on Monday. So I'll give them back to you on Friday. You're going to hold on to them. Monday, we're going to look at the prompt, take a look at setup and structure and all those kinds of things, because certainly doing the TWA is a little bit different than you doing the Grapes of Wrath take-home essay. You didn't do anything wrong. You weren't in trouble as to why that was your quiz. Next week, for the Grapes of Wrath, when you're finishing up on Tuesday, you're going to have a quiz. It'll be a regular quiz, people promise, all that kind of stuff. It's not going to be an essay. I wanted to do a few things. I wanted you to get a lot of writing in the first 3 weeks. So assuming you have your rough draft for Friday, that'll be 3 essays in 3 weeks. It doesn't really get much worse than that, which is a good way to start the year, knowing it doesn't get much worse than this. So that mission accomplished. Number 2, I think people generally perform better on TWAs, especially the first one, not knowing they're going to have to do it. Sometimes people will psych themselves out before it actually happens. Now, some of you might have started to psych yourself out around second period when you were hearing rumors about such evil deeds taking place. But hey, you can't always help it. But I think the first one, you generally perform better when you just have to do it and you don't have time to think about it. I don't generally typically do surprise TWAs. I'm not going to promise they'll never happen again, but it's certainly not like a monthly occurrence or anything along those lines with it. People do generally tend to like the TWAs better than take-home essays as the year goes on because it's over, it's done, you don't have to worry about it. AP exam, thank you, Luke, you just leave it right there. AP exam, you're going to have 3 essays to do in 2 hours, which is 120 minutes. To do the math, that's 1 essay every 40 minutes. So the nice thing with the class period is it's a pretty good practice run of how that AP exam would work. And some of you were physically tired when it was over. You know, you were shaking your hand and going like this. Some of you were mentally fatigued. So it's just kind of part of that preparation that we do for the exam as we get closer to it. But it's not going to be a common thing that all rain check quizzes are that way. I don't have the time or energy to read through 70-some essays, every week. So it's not going to be a common occurrence all the time. I think there's anything else about those. Any questions about? Oh, points for it. They'll be your first essay grade. I also wanted you to get feedback on an essay before submitting a Grapes of Wrath essay. That was the other thing I wanted to mention. Rough drafts are good, but it's nice to get something graded before you have to turn in like the bigger essay. Take-home essays, like the Grapes of Wrath, generally are 50 points. Grapes of Wrath is going to be 50 points. In-class essays about books, like what you did yesterday, are generally 35 points. And sometimes we'll do in-class TWAs just that are random prompts, like practice ones from AP exams from years past that there's nothing you can prep for. Those are generally 25 points. So this one will, be your first essay, but the Grapes of Wrath score will be worth more than what the Heart of Darkness one is. And the other thing is you did your Heart of Darkness essay, so you don't have to worry about another essay for that book. So that is all done. Still have reading checklist for part 3 next week, and we are going to take a multiple choice test, which we don't normally do, but there is going to be a test for the whole book. So Jack can't close his book and go, hey, did my essay, I'm done. There's still more assessments to come with it, but there is not going to be any take-home rhetorical analysis, that type essay for Heart of Darkness. Okay? Any mean words you need to spout out before we continue with that in your system? People don't take me up on it. Luke, make sure you bring in Bedford Reader tomorrow. And those page numbers and whatnot are on your course syllabus as well. There we go. So what do you think?
I hate it.
Can't say that. Our job, you can't say I hate it, can't say I love it, because our job's not to critique it. Our job is to figure out what's going on. And I'm not saying that to be mean or whatnot. We're not critiquers. That's not our duty. So and that doesn't mean also. Just generally, anytime we start going over works, we'll take a couple days and just kind of go over what's happening with it. And in some cases, we kind of go over summary. In some cases, we'll start going, hey, did you pick up on any of those allusions or symbolism, imagery, things like that. Other cases, it'll be more like Q&A where I don't get this part. I can't keep track. What's the difference between the accountant and the manager? What's up with the brickmaker? He's a brickmaker who doesn't make bricks. So certainly we can have questions about things that are going on. And yes, we will critique. I'm not going to say we'll never say yes, we like it or no, we don't. But in all honesty, it doesn't matter because it's still a job that we have so far as what's happening within the text. So are there any questions that people have right off the bat from anywhere throughout the course of the book? Are there any characters that you're having a tough time keeping track of? Are there anything that you notice where you go, this seems like it's kind of important, but I have absolutely no idea why?
The old ladies knitting with the black yarn.
Did you have a flashback to Tale of Two Cities?
Yeah.
I'm not fine with that
Sorry, Luke.
You didn't miss out.
one. Yeah. Doesn't sound like
So the company office with the knitting women. Okay. We're going to come back to them. Absolutely. What else?
So, like, did the Kurtz dude die when he got hit with the arrow, or what?
Wait, you did. Well, Kurtz we haven't met yet.
Well, wait. So who got shot?
The helmsman.
Okay.
So you got the boat, you got the steamer.
Yeah.
Now, and this is the part that can get kind of confusing, and I'm not, I don't want to make it sound like I'm judging solely anybody in this room who wrote this, because to be honest, I don't remember. I know multiple folks did. With the prompt that you had yesterday, it's Marlowe's description of Kurtz, which is fairly ironic because at this point within the book, he has not met Kurtz. Like, he has not seen him, but now he's going into all this detail about him. Other people were also, mentioning when he first sees him, but we haven't really seen him yet. You also have people talking about, Kurtz's death. Well, we haven't seen him, so we don't really know that he's dead. I do promise that you will meet Kurtz. Kurtz does show up in the book. You're on page, I think, 128 at the end of part 2. I want to say it's 135 when he appears. So he is there. He's alive. Well might not be a good word to describe him, but he is there. So, but there's certainly still a whole mystery surrounding Kurtz, because we know very little about him, but now all of a sudden we have this whole passage describing his bald head and his godlike status, because he's among the high devils of the land, and why is the jungle laughing at him, or what's going on with that. Now, when Marlowe's in the steamer and they're coming towards Kurtz's compound, because they are getting close to now the inner station, and this is where people get lost. You got the outer station, the central station, the inner station. Kurtz is in the inner station. The arrows start coming out of the bushes and whatnot. The helmsman, who would basically be the guy who's driving the boat. You think of the big ship wheel. The helmsman would be the guy with that and also controlling the direction. He's the one who gets shot with the arrow and dies. Marlowe refers to, the indigenous people as natives, savages, cannibals. But he feels bad when the helmsman dies. So, Marlowe's even kind of a tough guy to figure out where is your moral compass with all of these things. But it's a pretty brutal attack. They're taking cover. But the guy driving the ship is the one who gets killed. And, blood is gushing out of people into shoes and boots and all that kind of stuff. And it gets pretty gross. Hey, the title's Heart of Darkness. What do you expect? What else? Anything else jump out? Confusing questions? Since I mentioned, and I'm not, Shelby, I'm not ignoring your thing, because we are going to definitely get to the whole point with the knitting women. But since I mentioned about, order of things, not counting Marlowe on the boat at the beginning on the Nellie when you got the unnamed narrator describing what's going on. What would be Marlowe's travel log through this whole journey? Where does he start, and then what's point B and C and D and all those kinds of things? What are places that we know? There's got to be some places that we know. This is when we break the awkward silence. I mean, who's he working for? So where would he start? Where in Belgium? Most likely, if it's, all he says is the company. Where would the company's headquarters probably be if this is Leopold's ownership private land? Probably going to be in the what of Belgium? Anyone know the capital? Brussels, yeah. So he starts in Brussels, and this is where the knitting women will be and all that kind of stuff. Company headquarters. And then where would he go from Brussels? What's the continent that the Congo's in, Jack? Well done, thank you. So then he goes to the coast. Then from the coast, where does he need to go? as he starts working his way towards Kurtz, and this is where the various stations start showing up. So what's the first station that he goes to? And again, you don't get like specific names, but it gets described as what station. There's 3 of them. You got the first one's going to be the outer station. Abby, I'm kind of putting you on the spot. Do you remember anybody who would be at the outer station besides Marlowe? Because this is when he really starts to meet people. He's not, no, not him yet. Pardon?
The manager?
Not there yet.
The guy with the beard. That, yeah, he was described as having a really long beard that he like tucked up in the napkin or whatever he was like in the mud.
Yes,
Yeah.
he is there, and then I think you also said the accountant is there. So the accountant and Santa Claus. Then he goes from outer station to, and this is where you get the brickmaker. This is where you get the manager. It's not called middle. It's not inner.
Yeah, it's
Central. So central station is where you have brickmaker. You have manager. And you also have Marlowe's what? Because this is important. If you're going to get to the interstation, you need a boat. But what's wrong with the boat? It's basically underwater. So there's your boat. We need to fix that before we get to go anywhere. So that's where his actual boat is. And then the last place that he is going to be headed off to, this will now be the interstation, which is where we're looking to finally meet the whole Kurtz guy. This is important for a variety of reasons. Number one, you kind of just need to see where are all the places that he goes. The other thing that certainly kind of gets distorted, and in some ways I think purposely, is the amount of time. Anybody recall anywhere amount of time that it takes him to get from one place to the other, or how long he's stuck in any certain situations? Because I don't think people realize, how much time is taking place.
3 months to fix the boat.
He's in Central Station for 3 months. What's the item that they need to fix the boat? I need to have rivets, and someday we will get our rivets, and then they think they're getting the rivets and they celebrate, and then they still don't show up for a couple more months. Rivets are like screws that help join metal to metal. So if you ever look on like a hull of a ship, you'll see like these round dots. Looks like they have chicken pox. Those are rivets. So they're not quite screws, but they're fasteners for metal to metal. So you can't, the boat's not going to go anywhere if it has holes in it, so he needs to be able to fix the boat. And certainly you could argue, what kind of operation is this that has boats that are broken when you need the boat to get to point B or point D in this point? Well, it's not a very efficient one. So he is stuck in Central Station for 3 months. So right away, this journey has gone from, I thought it was like a week, to 3 months. Remember any other amounts of time?
There was an outer station. He was stuck there for 10 days.
Where he's in outer station?
I think it was outer.
Yeah, he's in outer station, you're right, for like 10 days. Stop. And then his journey from outer station to Central Station takes him 15 days. So you got like a whole month between outer station, his time there, and going to Central Station. It takes him, anyone remember how long to get from Brussels to the coast?
It was like 30 days, like actually, so.
Right. So from Brussels to getting to the coast. Oops. There we go. This takes him 30 days just to get there. And then with getting to the outer station, that part's not quite as bad, but it takes him a month just to be able to get to the coast and then getting into the outer station. And then from Central Station to Kurtz on the steamer, it takes him an additional 2. This is when you substitute in a word now. Hours, days, weeks, months, years. It takes him 2 months to get then to Interstation. So Marlowe's whole journey, you're talking over 6 months, at this point, from when he leaves, sees the knitting woman, and gets completely freaked out by him, to arrows are now attacking the boat. One of the first questions that people will also kind of have is, what is up with Marlowe's total and utter infatuation with Kurtz? Because what do we know about this guy? Which really is not a whole lot. But if you were to describe Kurtz, what are some things that we know about him? Whether it's speculative or we have, as close to fact as we can get at this point.
It's productive.
That's the nice way of putting it. He is productive when it comes to getting the ivory, and the accountant is totally amazed. This guy brings in more ivory, more money than any other station. You put them all combined, Kurtz is still head and shoulders above them with his bald head. Part of his productiveness is probably because he's also very... Pardon? We could argue that. I mean, we don't know him quite yet, but there's certainly a question about his sanity. I don't think there's any question that he is ruthless, and he will go to whatever lengths. I mean, a lot of you were noticing, he's among the high seat of the devils of the land. You don't really say that about nice people. Nicole is... She's that devil goddess of fourth period is not going to be a positive phrase that's going to get used to describe someone. So he is productive, but it doesn't mean that he's necessarily is playing within the rules all the time. Certainly his sanity is going to be called into question. What else do we know about him? We know his name, which is pretty significant, but we don't really know anybody else's. Marvel.
He said he's like a good speaker.
Okay. And we could even go like with words, because again, we haven't heard him yet, but we know his writing, and he is going to talk about his voice and the way that he can speak. So he is, I guess you could argue, eloquent. He's certainly able to get people to follow. Yesterday's passage gave some details about his heritage, so to speak.
I think his dad was British and his mom was French.
Okay. So he's British, he's French, says English educated, and the name Kurtz, like if you were to attach a nationality, ethnicity to Kurtz, what do you think? It certainly has a German quality about it. Jack, since you mentioned it, do you remember then kind of like the line that follows this part?
It was like all of Europe contributed to the making of Kurtz or something.
Okay, you're right. All of Europe contributed, like into his making, into his birth. British, French, possibly German. All of Europe. And some people were using this for the analysis part. Some people were mentioning like hyperbole, exaggeration. Not all of Europe goes into the making of him. We're mentioning some things with the details about him. But all of Europe contribute to Kurtz. What does Kurtz most likely ultimately symbolize? What is he representative of with, all of these characteristics? I think it'd be safe to say he is imperialism. So, why would it be appropriate to say all of Europe contributes into the making of Kurtz? All of Europe contributes part of the making. What's happening within Africa, the Congo, all of Europe is contributing to that imperialism. So once you pick up on the idea that, okay, there's going to be a little bit of a mystical quality about Kurtz, I think his being starts to make a little bit more sense. One thing, though, that can be extremely confusing and problematic, especially if you find yourself rooting for Marlowe, because generally the narrator's the guy that we tend to like the most because we know most about him. If Marlowe is infatuated with Kurtz, therefore Marlowe must be an imperialist or in favor of imperialism. There must be something about him, therefore, that he then likes us, which we're not probably going to like as a reader, because that makes it seem as if he's a pretty horrible, bad guy then. Why would Marlowe be infatuated, obsessed, whatever words you want to use, with Kurtz? And not that we know the answer, but what would be reasons why he could be? Whether it be based on this description or whether it be based on information that we know about him. Like, what would be ideas? It's brainstorm.
He has to have like some kind of motivation for doing what he's doing, so he's kind of like setting a goal since he has like so long to think about like nothing.
I'm stuck out here for 6 months. The one name that keeps coming up over and over again, and this guy starts bringing it up, is Kurtz. Everyone else that he meets, brickmaker, doesn't make bricks. Manager, total twit. Boat, broken. Accountant, really seems to hate people wearing white all the time. Every single person that he meets does not have any kind of positive quality about him, but the name that keeps coming up over and over and over again is Kurtz. So yeah, if I have a purpose out here, there must be something good that I'm going to be looking for, or something at least worthwhile of my time. Maybe Kurtz could be it. And certainly, I mean, you think about anything that you've ever wanted, whether it be you can't wait for a movie to come out, or you're hooked and you can't wait till next week when the iOS X comes out 10 for your iPhone. There was a toy you wanted when you were 5, and you were just waiting and waiting and waiting for it for your birthday. You will build something up, and more often than not, you build it up to the moment, and then the moment arrives, and it's all right, it's fine, but it's not what you were necessarily hoping for. So we know that Kurtz is going to show up eventually. One of the questions will be, well, how does Marlowe now react to him now that he realizes who he is, what he's like, and all those kinds of things? But there is a definite contrast, juxtaposition of ideas just within that passage yesterday that you looked at, where he's mesmerizing and he's also a devil. He has a bald head that's withered away. The ivory has basically consumed him. There's nothing left of him besides that bone. His flesh is basically gone, but he's a really good speaker. You know, those are things that you wouldn't necessarily put together, but there's something about him that still attracts Marlowe. And keep in mind, Marlowe's profession, why would he want to go into the Congo? Part of it could be if he comes out, he's probably going to make money. And if you're a guy who wants to go to all the ends of the earth, and at this point, I mean, the Congo is in the heart of the continent. We mentioned it's referred to as the heart of darkness. I mean, that's just the lingo, the term for it, the slang for where he's going. Why do people go places where you probably shouldn't go? You're looking for adventure. You know, you're seeking something. So in some ways, Kurtz kind of could be that ultimate adventure. But once you realize where Kurtz is and what he kind of does become representative of, I think now some other parts will start to make a little bit more sense. One of those things certainly being the company office. What are the women doing? They're knitting with their black thread, so they're measuring, they're cutting, measuring, and cutting. Ask Shelby, hey, does that sound anything familiar to which area of Tale of Two Cities? Tale of Two Cities, this part, what kind of allusion could be taking place? I want to say Disney's Hercules, they show up in the film in that one. You have the Fates, and if you're not familiar, the Fates are Greek Roman mythology. Luke, you haven't read Tale of Two Cities, but I bet you can figure out what the Fates determine your fate. So what do? They measure and cut the string. So some poor soul, you know, they measure out a couple inches, cut. Person's not lasting too long. They take string, they walk down the hall, go down the stairs, parking lot, cross the street. They try to cut mine, doesn't break, can't cut it. Immortality right here in front of you. 84 years from now, so we're going to be talking about this. But what's the string that they're cutting? It's black string. Why is that significant for what the company is responsible for? Jordan, looks like you know.
We're responsible for like any deaths and stuff in Americans.
Sure, you got deaths of natives all over the place, whether it be interstation where Kurtz is, and you'll kind of get an idea as to how many deaths he's responsible for as you learn more and more about him. When he gets to the outer station, I believe it is on page 82, there's like a death grove where he sees a bunch of the workers, which we know really are slaves at this point, are dying. He notices something around the one's neck.
It's like a big chain.
It's not a chain. I mean, it would be acting, but it's the first group he meets are chained together, and they're like making way for a railway, for trains to start to kind of get in. But where these people, they're not working, they're just all lying there. He takes a look at the one, and around his neck, there's a piece of, it's called worsted, which is basically the rope that they would use on ships. But make no mistake, what is the color of the rope that's going around his neck? It is certainly white, where you're going to have that symbolic quality similar to what was taking place with the Fates, where they are being choked out or killed, by all of the whites. The office where the company is at, it's very dark, it's very shady. There's hardly any light coming in, so it's very much a dark, gloomy kind of place. They don't refer to the city of Brussels. Anybody remember, and this would be mega bonus points, anybody remember how the city gets referred to?
It's like a big one that starts with a C.
No. Shucks. That one backfired. If you have your book with you, take a look at page number 73. It's not the first paragraph, but the first full paragraph that's on the page. At the top of the page, it's a continuation from page 72. Second paragraph mentions the city and reminds him of, there's a C in the word. Ben, did you find it? Thank you, Ben. And what's the word before it? Okay. It is a whited sepulcher. The spelling doesn't really match the pronunciation. Anyone know what a sepulcher is?
And then like a painting cup.
No. That could be chalice, which would be a C, which is not Belgium or Brussels. Kara?
Isn't it like a tomb or like?
Yeah, it's almost like a mausoleum. It's a big tomb. Drink this, and you can go to the sepulcher. Whited sepulcher. On the outside, it would look nice, white, clean, pure, because it's probably made of marble. The phrase whited sepulcher, a lot of people, and I'm not trying to turn this into Bible 101, but the term whited sepulcher shows up multiple times when Jesus talks to the Pharisees and basically criticizes them. He goes in, you two are like whited sepulchers. You are beautiful on the outside, but all that you preach, all that you teach is death, destruction. You're a building of death and bones. So Brussels, the city, gets compared to this whited sepulcher, or essentially a tomb. Dust, bones. Hey, you're talking about connotation. This is not positive by any means. Plus, you also throw in the fact that, okay, Shelby, who's in this tomb? You got the old lazies measuring and cutting. Essentially, Brussels is going to be a tomb for all of these people, which now, again, you kind of go with this, mention again, illusion. You have these references to death, despair. Certainly, imperialism is starting to take shape as having that negative quality. The doctor, what's the doctor do to Marlowe before he leaves? Measures his skull. And the assumption is that when Marlowe comes back, no, If Marlowe comes back, his skull is going to be smaller. Because by spending time in the jungle, in the Congo, his humanity is going to get sucked out, his soul is going to get sucked out, his intelligence is going to get sucked out. What's happened to Kurtz, based on the description, you know, the jungle basically has got the best of him. It's taking his hair away, it's making him bald, it's withering him away. The manager, who he does not like, when he first shows up, goes, anyone coming down here should not have any entrails or inner organs because you're going to get sick. You're going to die. Why is the manager still employed? Because he doesn't do anything? Because he doesn't die, which is a pretty big bonus for him. But so far as personality, nothing. There's one other name that gets mentioned besides Marlowe and Kurtz, and it's why Kurtz gets the job. Start with an F.
No worries.
I don't know.
And Abby, it is
Riesling.
okay. But what's his nationality?
Dane.
Yeah, he was a Danish captain. Fresleven, Fresleven. What happened to him? He died because he got in an argument about
Oh, chickens.
chickens with the chieftain and the son. He killed the chieftain's son killed him. They got in an argument about 2 hens. Most of you should be going, that is pretty stupid. What happened to Fresleven? He probably went insane. What's the question about not Marlowe, about Kurtz, and I think Luke was the one who mentioned it, is his sanity. One of the arguments about the Congo in general is it will take away anything that makes you human. So you can certainly see, and we know this would not be true, but you can certainly see from the Brussels standpoint, the company, they expect bad things are going to happen because they're traveling into where? Not just the Congo, but part of darkness. One of the parts, and I think it was at the end of the first column that you were looking at yesterday within your passage, one of the things that Marlowe says about Kurtz is you can't judge him, those of you that have pavement under your feet living in a city, because where he is at, there are no cities, and there's also no police. There's no morals. There's butchers and policemen, but if you don't have police around, what's going to happen? You don't have any reason to follow moral code of conduct, and then you end up being just the way that he is. So next chapter, promise, you meet him, we'll learn a little bit more about him.